I've been a roller coaster all day. I had so much stage fright all morning, and now I'm just like a house on fire. I couldn't wait to come in and host the show. Good afternoon. My name is Brendan McGuire, filling in for Barney Shinkrook. Ahead on today's SportsCage, we will visit with Dante Caria, the voice of the Regina Pats, ahead of Game 3 tonight under the orange top between the Pats and the Medicine Hat Tigers. Arash Madani and Glen Suitor with their weekly check-ins as well. So over the weekend, I spent some time out in rural Saskatchewan, and congratulations to the Milestone Flyers, who captured the Provincial D Division Championship with a 2-1 victory over the Macklin Mohawks, and we were treated to some fine dining and ribs in the luxury box / sound booth of the Milestone Arena by team historian Al Muscowie. Look at me sounding like Barney talking all the senior, eh? Okay, let's get to our first guest. John Hodge from 3 Down Nation is on the line, and we were going to talk a little bit about the CFL Draft Combine. I used to obsess about the Combine on NFL Network, and then I got NFL'd out, and I canceled it like a lot of other people did. I think the NFL Network subscribers are down about 50%, but that's here nor there. John, I was going to ask you, do we have John? We do. Okay. I was going to ask you, are you still doing stuff for the Curling Network?
Yeah, a little bit. Having fun. It's great.
Did you see, what's his name? The guy who, sometimes he's from BC, sometimes he's from Saskatchewan, and right now he's from Manitoba. He didn't win anything when he was from Saskatchewan, and he just won the Worlds from Manitoba.
You're talking about Matt Dunstone winning the Brier?
Thank you. Sorry, he was on the tip of my tongue. Thank you. Yes.
He hasn't won the Worlds. He's at the Worlds right now. He's 5-2. His team beat China this morning. They've got Sweden tonight. Sweden undefeated. So I think for a first Worlds, he's off to a good start, but he's going to have to keep the W's coming if he wants to finish top 2 in the field.
I feel like if you were anywhere else in the world, people would know you as John Hodge from 3 Down Nation. But because you do live in Winnipeg, do you get more people coming up to you on the street? Are you the guy from the Curling Network?
No, I covered one of the Grand Slams earlier this year, and I had multiple people come up to talk to me about 3 Down and football. So if anything, it's been the opposite, but who knows? We'll see.
I wanted to talk about the CFL Combine that just passed, and there's all this stuff about measurables and whatnot, and you know me, I don't love analytics. I think there's a lot of stuff that gets overblown from analytics. One example that I thought was great that was brought up back when I used to watch NFL Network was the great Herm Edwards, who coached the New York Jets and then the Kansas City Chiefs later. He had a really nice career in the NFL as a linebacker, and he never got drafted. And Carl Peterson, the longtime president of the Kansas City Chiefs, and he did really well in the USFL as well, and he even plucked Canadian CFL castoffs. He said, the thing that I don't like about the Combine is that we do it in our underwear. Do we play the game in our underwear? No, we do not. And Herm Edwards was probably a guy who ran a 4.7 or 4.8, whatever, a slow 40-yard dash in his underwear, but then he probably ran about the same time in his gear and actually turned out to be a pretty good player. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought is, thank goodness for my colleagues that I don't cover the Combine in my underwear. That would be not a pretty sight for just about anybody.
Might be able to make it an event again because they've tried to make it an event and they failed miserably every time. But go ahead.
Look, I think the Combine is a key event. It is important. I think speaking with scouts, and I've been covering this event and this draft for a decade now, is there's 3 main kind of criteria. If you picture player analysis as a triangle, the top of the triangle is film study. Film is always the most important thing. If a guy looks like he can play on film, there's a good chance that he's a good player, right? The 2 bottom parts of the triangle are the 2 parts that you can assess at Combine the best anywhere else. One of those sides is the personality side. All of these teams conduct interviews. A lot of teams actually have multiple interview rooms running at the same time to speak to as many of these players as possible, get to know them as people, and ask them some tough questions. It's like, hey, maybe we heard from one of your coaches that you don't spend enough time in the gym, or maybe we heard, you were healthy enough to play this past year, but you missed an extra few weeks saying that your hamstring hurt. Like, these guys face tough questions, or in some cases they'll ask things like, hey, you're playing right guard. Here's a defensive setup. How would you know which player to block if this was the defense you were faced with? How are you going to go through your checks and know which man you're responsible for? So the mental side, the personality side is important. And then the third part of the triangle is what you're talking about, Brendan. It's the athletic testing. And I do think that's the order of importance that teams put on. It's film 1, interviews 2, testing 3. That said, testing is important. Like you talked about Herm Edwards running a 4.748. That's not a great time for an NFL linebacker, but it's not a disqualifying time. So I think that's what teams are looking at. Okay, if the film is good and the interviews are good, as long as the testing's fine, they're happy. If the testing is disqualifyingly bad, that can unfortunately lead to some good football players who maybe were just good at the college level and can't necessarily contribute at the professional level. So that's kind of the breakdown of the way I see it.
Those are valid points, and I'm sure that these personnel people have been around long enough to know the right amount of emphasis to put on it. It's not like they just started evaluating yesterday. Who were some of the performers, or were there any performers that really jumped out to you like, wow, he tested really well? Because a lot of the stuff that they're being graded on probably isn't measurable or apparent to the media. It might be a situation where the general manager of this team likes how he responded this way, whereas you have data and numbers on things like the shuttle, the run, the bench press, etc. Were there any athletes that really jumped out at you like, oh, that's interesting, he really performed there?
There were 2 players, I'll give you one on offense, one on defense, who I thought really exploded off the page. One of them is Nicholas Henning, offensive lineman out of Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. Henning played H-back for his first couple of seasons at Queen's, moved to offensive tackle in 2024, and is just an absolute freak of an athlete. At 6'6", 298 pounds, he ran a 4.9 flat 40-yard dash.
Sorry, what's an H-back? What's an H-back? Sorry.
Essentially a tight end, fullback.
Okay.
Hybrid.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, good catch. For those who don't know, essentially a fullback, tight end, kind of pass catching, oversized, running back, blocker in the flat, those types of things. And special teamer, of course, which CFL teams are always looking for. But in the case of Henning, he's added weight. He played H-back at 250 to 260 pounds. He's now up to 298. And he just wears it incredibly well. He's built his body the right way. But to put that 4.90 40-yard dash into perspective, that was the fastest time any offensive lineman ran at the NFL Combine. There's 38 NFL offensive linemen who participated in that Combine, or future NFL offensive linemen, and Henning is as fast as any of them. He also put up 27 reps on the bench, which is above average for an offensive lineman. So he has already been getting NFL attention. I've been led to believe that the CFL itself, as well as his agent, have been contacted by NFL teams going, wow, this guy's testing numbers are off the charts. We have to take a look at him. And another player who I thought really helped himself was Eric Rasco, linebacker out of Angelo State. This is a guy with a bit of a unique story. He qualified for Canadian citizenship late, as American born. He's already 25 years old, but he came in and at 6'1", 210, ran a 4.56. He was the fastest linebacker. And I think there were some questions about, anytime a guy qualifies for Canadian citizenship late, they grew up in the States, they didn't grow up watching the CFL, how seriously are they going to take this league and this type of event? Well, Rasco came in and blew the doors off the testing. So I think a week ago, he was probably around, maybe late round 2, early round 3 type of guy. Since the Combine, he's now being talked about, according to my sources, as a late first round, early second round kind of guy. So that would be 2 players who I thought really stood out in the testing.
Talking to 3 Down Nation CFL draft expert John Hodge here on the SportsCage on 620 CKRM. I wanted to ask you about that scenario where players qualify late to be a Canadian. And, some might argue, I guess, that the ratio wasn't really built for that. But I don't hear a lot of complaining about it. And some of us kind of like the idea of maybe softening it a little bit so that some of those guys do qualify. And I think that Alex Singleton is probably the poster child of some somebody who maybe never would have come, maybe never would have made it in the CFL, but he did. He's turned it into an embarrassment of riches down south, and he speaks really highly of the Canadian Football League all the time and comes up to see Stampeder games, etc. So it's kind of a good news story. Are there a lot of players who fall in that category at the Combine when you look at the prospects who tested?
No, I would say each year there's probably somewhere between 3 and 5 guys, and of those 3 to 5, maybe 2 or 3 get drafted. And I know that some people call them fake Canadians or, pseudo Canadians. And look, I remember back in I believe it was 2019 in Toronto, Kyle Saxlead, offensive lineman out of UNLV, might have been 2018 in Winnipeg, but regardless, he was one of these guys who was born down south and learned that through one of his parents, he could get his Canadian citizenship and qualify for national status in the CFL. And Combine was the first time he'd ever set foot in the country. And yes, you could argue that that's not the spirit of the ratio, but by the same token, if someone's literally a Canadian, right, and any person with a Canadian parent can get Canadian citizenship by just filing the right paperwork, I think it's hard to say that you're not Canadian in the eyes of the CFL. Like, a Canadian is a Canadian. There's lots of Canadians who aren't born here, right? So I think that's kind of the counter argument. And the other thing is, more and more every single year, NFL teams are looking at Canadian talent. There's more Canadian talent going down to the NCAA level. Akeem Mesidor out of Ottawa, played at the University of Miami. He's going to be a first-round NFL draft pick almost surely. And then whether it's Ottawa-born defensive lineman Rene Conga and Wesley Bailey out of Louisville, they could both be picked. Logan Taylor, Nova Scotia-born offensive lineman at Boston College, he could be picked. It's also not impossible that Edmonton-born offensive lineman Albert Reese IV out of Mississippi State is going to get drafted. Like, we could theoretically have 5 Canadians picked in this year's NFL draft, with a bunch more signing as undrafted free agents. I'm not saying it's going to be 5. I suspect it's going to be 2 or 3. But the point is, if the NFL is taking 5, 8, 10 of our players every year, I think if you can find a way to create some more Canadians and bring them up, at least in my opinion, that's a positive thing.
And there are some people who don't like the ratio, period, so they would be in favor of it too. I was going to say, the day that AJ Ouellette signed in Saskatchewan, he was in this I think he was sitting in this chair that I'm sitting in, and we were talking, and he mentioned that he has Canadian ancestry. I don't know that he ever would have qualified. He said that he was told that maybe if he had pursued it earlier, he could have qualified as a Canadian, but by the time they had figured it out, he had already played a game in the CFL as an American. Apparently, once you've done that, the train has left the station. You can't apply. So one question in my mind, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, how much extra money do you think AJ Ouellette could be making right now in the CFL? And I have no idea if he would have qualified as a Canadian, but if he did, how big of a difference would that make for a player like him?
Well, I mean, Brady Oliveira, I do think he's a better player than AJ Ouellette, but AJ Ouellette, I believe, is making in and around the $175,000 mark. Brady Oliveira is up at around 280. So, on average, if you're a Canadian ratio breaker, you always get a premium. Canadian offensive linemen, like guys who play the traditional spots, still make more than their American counterparts. But especially if you're a corner, a running back, a Canadian who can start at a non-traditional position, yeah, you can command more. So I would guess if AJ Ouellette was Canadian, maybe he's worth somewhere right now in the 235 range, right? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if, and again, this is pure speculation. It depends on a bunch of factors, but and obviously AJ Ouellette, you could argue his early career earnings would go down because Canadians are subject to 3 years of slotted money. You can't make more than, I believe it's $82,500 as a first-year CFL player or at any point in that 3-year rookie deal, whereas Americans tend to sign 2 years, and then they can hit the jackpot in that 3rd year already if they're a standout at their respective positions. So early in his career, I think you could say that Ouellette would have actually earned more money as an American. But by this point of his career, yes, he has been cost a significant amount of money. How much? Impossible to say.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you about quarterbacks at the Combine. I'm always curious to see where we're going with the development of Canadian quarterbacks. I know that one thing I think it's changed in the last few years. There's so many loopholes and rules. I've done Canada West football on this station for 2 years, and I still don't fully understand all the eligibility rules. But the understanding I have is these American quarterbacks, like a guy in Calgary, his name's David Jordan, who Henry Burris sent from Florida A&M. If he comes up, he plays at the Canadian school and does his full, I think he has to do 4 years. He can enter the draft as a Canadian quarterback. So I think that's a great idea. I mean, we want to keep an eye on it. We don't want to get to the point that our college system is just overrun with American quarterbacks, so that we don't have room for Canadians to develop. I'd be curious to hear your take on that.
I think it's good, right? I mean, it's something that the idea is, if somebody is trained right in Canadian football, if they have spent a significant amount of time in Canadian football, then there's no reason why they can't be considered Canadian at the professional level, right? This is someone who's come here, been developed by Canadian coaches to play the Canadian game. And I believe the rule is you need at least 3 years of U Sports and you need to graduate. You can't just have attended the school. You actually have to graduate. Don't quote me on that. That's off the top of my head. But I'm relatively confident that that's accurate. And there are examples already of American-born players who have qualified for national status this way. Jonathan Edouard, defensive back for the Toronto Argonauts, I believe is one. Kalodi Amusan, a defensive lineman out of Windsor in last year's draft, was another example. In the case of these quarterbacks, however, at this year's Combine, all are Canadian-born. All eyes were on two of them, Loa Latondres Regimbald out of McGill and Christian Veilleur out of Georgia State. Veilleur, there's no nice way to say it, was simply not accurate enough in the drills that I saw. This is a guy who played meaningful snaps as a true freshman at Penn State, eventually transferred down a few times. I think there was a real chance, if he had a good combine, that he'd get drafted and be in a camp. I still think there's a chance he's going to be in a camp, but I'm not confident he's going to get picked in the 2026 CFL draft. Loa Latondres Regimbald, I think, secured his status as a draft pick, though I'm not sure he's going to be in a camp as a quarterback. This is a guy who's 6'3", 213 pounds, ran a 4.62, did a broad jump of 10 feet, 11 inches. Like, this guy's explosiveness, his quickness is off the charts, and he did take some reps at Combine as a receiver, though he did also say in an interview with 3downnation.com that he's open to playing defensive back. So he's somebody who I think, as an athlete, and he'll get comps to Brad Sinopoli if he pursues the receiver side. He'll get comps to somebody like Tommy Stevens, maybe, if he ends up being a short yardage specialist. But he's a guy who's multifaceted. I don't think he'll ever be an every down quarterback in the CFL, but has elite athleticism, really impressive size, good versatility, and seems to have done a great job interviewing with teams. A really likable guy, seems like a really smart guy as well. So those are the two quarterbacks to know going into this year's CFL draft.
Did you get a chance to observe many of the Canada West players, and what about Carson Sombach?
Well, I think the standout for me in terms of the Can West guys was Charlie Parks out of the University of Saskatchewan, defensive end. There's a ton of defensive ends in this year's draft. And to be perfectly honest, I thought a lot of them were a little bit disappointing. I was standing beside a CFL veteran defensive lineman during a lot of the one-on-ones, and I asked this individual, what do you think of the edges? Because there's so many defensive ends, not many interior guys, but lots of edge guys in this year's draft. And his first answer was stiff. A lot of these guys look stiff. They might be more special teams bodies than pass rushers. And to me, Parks really impressed in the one-on-ones. He looked really, really nice. His ability to bend the edge. He was giving a lot of the offensive tackles problems with that. Obviously, a reigning Canada West All-Star for the Huskies. As for Sombach, I did not see a lot of his reps, so I can't really comment on that side of it. His testing, I will say, was okay. He tested at he ran a 4.74. That's not it's not fast, but it's not disqualifyingly poor. 31-inch vertical. The quickness was good. 7-second 3-cone drill. That was among the best of the defensive backs. And I think he measured up a little bit bigger than his brother Jackson, who now plays for the Calgary Stampeders. He measured in at just a smidge under 5'10", 191 pounds. Sombak, I've been a fan of Jackson Sombak since I saw him, I think, as a second year at the University of Regina. I'm thrilled that despite his relative lack of height, he's had the opportunity to play in the CFL because he's a heck of a player. And it looks like Carson, who was also a Can West All-Star this past season, might get that same opportunity.
Yeah, probably a prototype and of his brother, and they don't have the height, but they have the heart and they have the stats, and sometimes that can go a long way when you're trying to crack a pro roster. Never enough time. John Hodge, thank you for doing this, and I've just got the TV. I'm distracted by the curling again. Every time I think of you, I think of curling. I'm sure you're thrilled to hear that. Thanks again, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, BMac. Anytime.
Okay, that is John Hodge. You can check out his stuff at www.3downnation.com. Time to break. Still ahead in hour one of the Sports Cage. We will tee up tonight's Game 3 between the Pats and Tigers with Dante Caria, the voice of the Regina Pats, here on this station. You are listening to the Sports Cage, streaming through our YouTube channel at sportscage.com. Brennan McGuire and Colson Schultz taking you through this Tuesday edition of the Sports Cage for Sask Lotteries, bringing communities together. Sask Lottery products fund over 12,000 sports, culture, and recreation groups across Saskatchewan. Still ahead in hour one, we will check in with Diamond Dante from the Brandt Center, getting ready for Game 3 tonight. The Pats trying to take the lead in that first round series. That 2 versus 7 will get you every time. That's always ripe for an upset, and I felt that way going into the series. I know the Pats got blown out, I think, a couple times by Medhat during the season, but also beat them once and had some good competition against them. So
I think it's been a while since we beat them, though.
Yeah, it was early in the season. I think that win was like November, like it was a while back. Might have even been earlier than that. Right now, we're going to do the sprinkle of the day for Sports Select. Getting in on more of the sports action you want is as easy as playing sportselect.com. Simply make your picks online, generate your QR code, and lock in your bet at your local lotto spot retailer. Every bet is 100% legal with the chance of winning cash in hand. Sports Select, when you're ready to play, bet on the original. Must be 18 plus to play. Play responsibly. And I just love the fact that we're doing this with Sports Select and not some of these trashy offshore sites. And you see all those gimmicky ads that pop up on the broadcasts. But anywho, there was the one featured bet that showed up that we were talking about off air, the soccer game between Canada and Tunisia. Is that who it was?
Yeah, Tunisia, Canada, international friendly. Both of us, I don't think, know enough about it, so probably not going to touch that one.
Well, I probably don't know enough about the game I am picking either, but that didn't stop me. But yeah, no, that I've never seen that as a friendly type of sport to bet on, soccer, only because there's not a lot of scoring. You know, I think that's why football's such or basketball even, because there's just so much for different variety in scores. This part is interesting. I know a fellow in town, Regina, who makes money off of betting sites, and he even gets a hold of people, gets them to create an account for them or for him, and he'll go in and he'll make a bunch of money, and then they'll shut him down on some of those other sites that I'm talking about. But that part, it doesn't interest me. It's not that important. The reason I bring that up, what I thought was interesting is he showed me a printout of his betting history, and a lot of what he bet on was over-under. Simple as that. And I thought that was really interesting. Now, I'm not at all suggesting that that's a winning formula. And over-under was never something that I ever got too excited about, because you're not really rooting. You don't have a rooting interest. And it's fun when you have a rooting interest.
You either want a defensive struggle or a blowout. That's all you want. You don't pick a team.
Right. And so in this instance, and you might actually enjoy the game and not get too stressed. That's a big reason why I don't go on those other sites anymore. I found that it was just too obsessive for me about who's winning and losing, whereas now I get to be a sports fan when I'm not betting on it. But I digress. So the game that we're going to pick today for the sprinkle of the day, the Winnipeg Jets at Chicago Blackhawks. And I look at that over-under at 5.5, and I think, surely there's going to be at least 6 goals scored in this game. So based on that, I'm going to go and pick the over. and that is our sprinkle of the day for Sports Select. Getting in on more of the sports action you want is as easy as playing at sportselect.com. Simply make your picks online, generate your QR code, and lock in your bet at your local lotto spot retailer. Every bet is 100% legal with the chance of winning cash in hand. Sports Select, when you're ready to play, bet on the original. Must be 18 plus to play. Play responsibly. And if you make that pick and it works out for you, you're welcome. And if it blows up in your face, well, Colson let me do it, so blame him.
All right.
That's all I got for that. Coming up next, we will check in with Dante Caria to tee up Game 3 of the Regina Pats and the Medicine Hat Tigers. You are listening to the SportsCage and watching here on the YouTube feed and also on the home of the Riders and Pats, 620 CKRM. It's the Tuesday edition of the SportsCage for Sask Lotteries. Brendan McGuire and Colson Schultz on this edition of the program. Coming up in hour 2, Arash Madani and Glen Suitor a little bit later on in the show as well. You can chime in by calling 1-866-767-0620 or on the Prairie Mobile text line at 306-936-6262. Follow us on, I keep calling it Twitter, that garbage dump, at SportsCage is our handle. We'll get to our next guest because he knows no short sentences. He is the broadcast voice of the Regina Pats and will narrate Game 3 tonight between the Pats and the Medicine Hat Tigers from the Brandt Center. A very exciting showdown coming under the orange top. And hey, Dante, we've got you on phone, no video. Like, what gives? Did you just get out of the shower?
I'm currently setting up the press box as we speak, running around down here. So, unfortunately, I wasn't able to kind of sit in one place. I'm currently in the press box right now, kind of trying to set up the media area.
Oh, boo-hoo. Do you want some cheese with your wine?
Oh, come on, Brendan.
By the way, what do you think of the Blue Jays and what's happening to their pitching staff?
In what sense? I thought the pitching staff was pretty good in games 1, 2, and 3 of the season. Obviously, Ponce was rolling until he got hurt yesterday.
Yeah, but I mean, like, remember everybody thought that this was so great that Bieber was opting in? And
hold on a minute. Hold on. Are you telling me that you expect Little to be any different?
No, he gave us what I thought he'd give us. Yeah.
Yeah. He's JUNK.
I don't know. I guess I just expected, like, what's his name? Bieber can't go. Barrios can't go.
Not surprised.
Should we be all that excited about Max again? Really?
Yes, you should. He had a great spring. Look, there's a reason why they signed Dylan Cease. The last 5 years, he's made 32 or more starts. Like, he's very durable, and I think he's better now that he's added that changeup. You know, I was watching MLB Network last night, and Jake Peavy did a whole breakdown on just how he's even better now. You know, he's gotten paid, and he's ready to go. I mean, Barrios, you know, he was hurt last year, and, you know, he's hurt to start this season, and not surprised about Shane Bieber because he was hurt pretty much all of last season as well. And, you know, he pitched a ton in the playoffs for the Jays as well. And Savage, honestly, like myself and Dustin Mulliken, who do, you know, pitching lessons out of the dugout here in Regina, have called this for months. I mean, he's going to have shoulder problems for his whole entire career because of his mechanics.
You're talking about Bieber. Or Savage.
No,
you're talking about Savage. Yeah, you know, that's funny. That's funny you say that. I hadn't heard that chat that you and Dusty had, but it got me thinking because whenever you see a young phenom burst on the scene, sometimes they have long-term staying power, like David Price might be an example, but sometimes they flame out. I think of this one pitcher when the Jays won their back-to-back World Series in the early 90s. They went against the Braves, and the Atlanta Braves had an amazing four-man rotation for a while. They had Steve Avery, Greg Maddux, John Smoltz, and Tom Glavine, and Avery was kind of the fireballer, and by age 25, I think he had a nasty injury in his armpit, and he never recovered. And I sometimes wonder if Trey Savage is Steve Avery 2.0. You're probably too young to remember. You're probably too young to remember Steve Avery.
I am too young to remember, but Trey Savage is going to get hurt all the time. He will never be healthy because of the way he throws the baseball. It's very unorthodox as far as that arm slot. Nowadays, the most healthy delivery is the three-quarter arm slot. That is the most healthy delivery. Over the top, that stuff don't exist anymore. Like, for example, what we teach the kids here in Regina, myself and Dustin, is that three-quarter delivery, keeping your head still. What happens with Trey Savage is his head goes sideways, and he comes straight over the top, and there's so much torque on his shoulder. Like, I can't even imagine how sore his shoulder would be after every game. The only reason why nobody's ever said anything as far as his college coaches and probably growing up is because it's so hard to hit and it's so hard to pick up. I mean, we saw how good he was in the playoffs last year with that split finger and just how he was able to elevate that fastball up in the zone. I mean, like, I think he's going to be a Tyler Glass now where you just have to deal with the injuries because of the way he throws. And when he's in the game, he's pretty much unhittable, and that's what the Jays are going to have to deal with him, in my opinion.
Well, maybe they'll only get 2 or 3 years out of him, but what a sweet, sweet 2 or 3 years it will be. So we'll go along with the ride, hitting it at the right time. Okay, I guess we should talk a little hockey too. What was the stat you threw out on the TV the other day? That Game 2 Pats win was something like the 4th time all year that Medicine Hat only scored so many goals. What was that?
Yes. 2 or less for just the 4th time all season that they'd scored 2 or less. They didn't get shut out at all over the course of the season. They scored 1 goal once, and that was in a 6-1 loss in March to the Edmonton Oil Kings, and then they had scored 2 goals twice. Other than that, it's been 3 or above.
So what was it, a goaltender standing on his head? Was it just great defense? What was it?
Well, I think the Pats deserve a ton of credit as far as their overall team game goes, Brennan. I mean, they've kept Medicine Hat under 25 shots in each of the first 2 games of the series. The shot counts have been, I think, Game 1 was 25-18. Game 2 was 23-20. That's a very low shot count against the Medicine Hat Tigers team that is averaging close to 5.5 goals per game during the regular season, and a Tigers team that averages around 36 to 37 shots on net per game. So to hold that team to 23 and 25 shots through the first 2 games of the series, I think credit goes to the Regina Pats. Yes, goaltending has been good. Merrick Schlenker was very good in Game 2 as the Pats earned a 4-2 win. But just in general, I think the team is playing some really smart hockey. They're being really physical. I don't think we've seen the best of the Medicine Hat Tigers just yet, Brennan. And I'm not the only one that said that. Brad Haroff was one of the first guys to come out and say, hey, we're going to see a much different Medicine Hat Tigers team in Games 3 and 4 at the Brandt Center because, you know, they're not happy with their overall effort. They're doing some weird things on the ice right now. Very cute stuff. It almost looks like preseason or early regular season style hockey. We're going to see a completely different Tigers team tonight, I think.
Pretty big discrepancy. I didn't even realize it till I looked at it here. The difference in the standings, 49 points. Wow. Have you ever noticed, like, this is a 2 versus 7 series, and have you ever noticed that? I feel like that's usually the series that's ripe for an upset. That's where the big upsets happen.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Brennan. And, 49 points in terms of, you know, where these two teams are in the standings, but Regina hasn't shown that. They've played extremely hard. They've been a very motivated and hungry group. I think, I don't think I know this from speaking with Jay Seglin prior to Game 2. He said a lot of the guys in the dressing room were kind of shaking. They were very nervous getting ready for Game 1 with the big crowd and playing a juggernaut Medicine Hat team. They were nervous, you know, and, you know, Jay's turned to me and said, well, if you're not nervous, that means you don't care. So it's a good thing. But they were able to get the jitters out of the way in Game 1. And then they really came to play in Game 2 because, you know, they only had 6 players on the roster with playoff experience, right? So the rest of the roster had never played in a WHL playoff game. So they have the right to be nervous, right? It's the first ever WHL playoff game against a team that's the defending league champion. So now that they're finally able to get those nerves and those jitters out of the way, they can just play hockey.
Is the idea here just don't get into a track meet with them? Is that really the Pats' biggest chance? Just keep it tight, keep it low scoring? Play boring hockey.
I mean, they can't play that game. They can't play that style of game. You know that. You know, the Pats need to keep things real simple. And I really like the plays that they made off the boards. They had some really good zone entries. They had some really good zone exits. To me, I think we need to give Effer McNutt and Reese Hamilton a ton of credit because the way they move the puck out of their zone is phenomenal. They're not turning pucks over. They're rimming it off the walls effectively. The wingers are getting the puck off the boards when they need to. Brad Haroff said prior to the series that a very important thing will be managing the puck. And with that, he said that when we dump the puck, we have to put it in good areas for us to retrieve it. We're not just dumping the puck to give it back to their deep because what's the point of just dumping the puck in so that Jonas Wu and Bryce Pittsburgh could pick it up and just fly it up the ice? I mean, they're that skilled. I mean, say they didn't have defensemen that can move the puck up the ice. Maybe that's a little bit of a different story. But, dumping the puck is not you don't just dump it to dump it. You dump it because there's a reason behind it. Now, if you're in the middle of a line change, you just have to get it deep, right? But there are other ways to get the puck deep. And what Regina has done is they've really sent their forwards real hard on the end wall. Like Bryce Pickford and Jonas Wu are taking a beating back there, and they felt it.
On the YouTube chat, the Gooch, I don't like these silly names, but whatever. He says, I think what he's saying is he needs some typing lessons. Ask Dante about injuries in tonight's game, please.
The only one that I know of is Connor Bear. I don't think he'll play tonight for the Regina Pats. He got hit from behind, lost a couple of teeth in that game against Medicine Hat. Probably not going to play in tonight's game, but we'll have to wait and see. I haven't got the lineup just yet. As far as maybe Keats Fawcett, I think he's going to take warm-ups. I saw him skate in practice yesterday at the Brandt Center, so I think they're hopeful that he'll dress in tonight's game. But I don't know the lineup just yet. But as far as the injury, front is concerned, in regards to Fawcett, Regina's leading goal scorer and second on the team in points this past season. They need him desperately. The power play is 0 for 11 in the series. They need to find ways to score on the man advantage, and he's part of that. And with Maddox Schultz and Liam Pugh in the lineup tonight, and Fawcett potentially coming back from injury, that's essentially one whole line, right?
I was going to ask you, winning on the road against a good team like Medicine Hat, the odds are really stacked against that happening. Can the Pats afford to lose any games on home ice? And I'm putting you on the spot, but if you're going to emerge victorious, you think maybe one?
Yeah, I think they got to win here tonight. I mean, that will just install more belief. I was speaking with Will Bryant, the voice of the Medicine Hat Tigers earlier today, and he said that they haven't lost 2 games in a row since the fall. So that would be kind of a huge shocker to the Medicine Hat Tigers. How much more confidence do you think that would give the Regina Pats if they were able to pull off a home victory here tonight in Game 3? To go up 2-1 in the series and give Medicine Hat just their second consecutive loss for the first time since early November, from what I understand. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, that would be a big deal. But I think in a 2 versus 7, and this is not a regular 2 versus 7. Like, the point differential is massive, and so I guess if I'm going to call it the type of series where massive upsets happen, this might be the exception. Like, this would be a lot bigger than your typical upset of a 7 seed beating out a number 2. How much have you been paying attention to the other series that have been happening?
So I've been obviously paying attention fairly closely. I see that Prince George is up 3-0 in their series over Spokane. I think in the Western Conference, things are going as people would expect. All the teams in the higher spot in the standings are leading their series, whether it's 2-0 or 3-0. The Eastern Conference, we've seen some interesting games, in particular Calgary and Brandon. I know that Calgary leads that series 2-0 because of back-to-back overtime wins, but they've been extremely close. I mean, Brandon's lost 2 games in overtime. Like, it could go either way. That's been a very intriguing series. I don't know who is going to come out on top. That's a 4-5 seed, right?
Yep.
The Edmonton Saskatoon series is kind of cool to be a part of because that series I believe is even up at 1 heading to Saskatoon for games 3 and 4 this week. So that's been a fun series to watch. And then Prince Albert Red Deer. I know that their storylines of Mark Hapshide against his old team, that he won a championship with in 2019. But Prince Albert, that's a tough series to be in, whether Regina was in that series or whether, Red Deer was in that series. And, obviously I think everybody expected Prince Albert to be up 2-0 through the first 2 games at home.
Seemed like the Raiders maybe lost their way a little bit after Habshide left, but they sure found it. It didn't take too long. Why are they so good?
They're the deepest team in the league, in my opinion. They're the best team in the Western Hockey League. I think that they'll win the WHL championship as far as, from what I've seen. I think Curtis Hunt's done a really good job complementing that team with the acquisition of Braden Coots, guy that's played, NHL games this season, World Junior player. The crazy thing about their roster is they've been playing playoff hockey all season long. If you look at their team, they don't have one single player, not one guy, top 15 in WHL scoring. Medicine Hat has 4, 2 of them on the back end, and they could have had 5 if Andrew Basha didn't play most of the season with the Calgary Wranglers, the Calgary Flames AHL affiliate. So, that Prince Albert team is a team, man. They are a team. They're not just a bunch of individual players that care about themselves. They play as a team, and it starts at the top, with their captain, Justice Christensen, and obviously with their head coach, Ryan McDonald, and their general manager, Curtis Hunt. Like, that team wants to win together. They're not playing for themselves. They have 4 lines that they can roll out there every single time. The crazy thing, every time that I would broadcast a Regina and Prince Albert game, I'd always sit down and talk with Ryan McDonald, whether we had a mic on or not. And the one thing that he always talked to me about, Brendan, was that, look at the score sheet, Dante. How many multi-point games? How many guys got on the score sheet? And you'd look, and there'd be like 16, 17, 18 guys that got on the score sheet. Some nights, all players got on the score sheet, including their goaltender. How rare is that? Like during the regular season, now it's probably going to change as they go deeper in the playoffs. Well, they're going to shorten the bench a little bit, et cetera. But they're playing everybody. Like, if I would look at, and this is not, information that's privy to the public, but I would, I'd often ask Max Paddock for, some of the ice times from some of the other teams, and their top players are getting like 13, 14, 15 minutes of ice time. Like, it's all even across the board. There's nobody that's playing more than anyone else, right? That's probably going to change as they move on, in rounds 2 and 3 and maybe to the league final. I'm sure that's going to be a little bit different because generally you cut things down to 3 lines. But as far as the regular season goes, like, they play together as a team. There's no individuals on that team, at least from what I've been told and from what I've seen. And, I do have, a little bit of inside info as far as, knowing the Howe family. And I've spoken with Tanner Howe, who has his brother Connor Howe on the team, and he's told me the exact same thing. He has said that team is built to win because they play as a team. They have a good culture. Everybody likes each other. Obviously, I don't know about Medicine Hat because I don't have any people that I know that are within the room and stuff like that, but that's just what I've heard about Prince Albert.
You sound so fired up to broadcast a game tonight, just talking about all this, and I know we're tight for time, but about your point about the Prince Albert Raiders, one thing I learned my very first year of broadcasting hockey, I remember it was the season the Humboldt Broncos won their first national title. I think it was their first ever, 2002, 2003. But what amazed me was the team that I was broadcasting for was missing the playoffs and had all these stars. And the Humboldt Broncos that year didn't have any big stars. They were just exactly the way you just described the Prince Albert Raiders. And it's funny how fans so often think and organizations think that you need to tank and you need to have high draft picks and you need to have stars. And that's all a bunch of baloney. It's all about the core that you build from within.
Yeah, but Prince Albert has stars as well.
Yeah, no, I know. I get it, but I'm just saying it's your core. That's the difference. Who has the best core is usually the team that wins. Harry Neal used to say it, and it was always cheesy at the end of the Stanley Cup. It's not the team with the best players that wins. It's the players on the best team. I think there's some real truth to that. I'd let you respond, but I am totally out of time.
Oh, come on.
What do you got?
Answer.
You have 10 seconds.
My 10 is say that I go by the exact same way when I'm coaching my baseball teams. Culture over everything. Team first.
And don't pitch like Trey Savage. Words to live by.
Never.
If you want longevity. Pre-game
Never.
show at 6:30. Puck drop at 7 o'clock here on the almighty 620. Dante to Caria. Have a great time tonight. It's not every day you get to do a playoff game.
Thanks. I appreciate it, man. I'm looking forward to it. Kelly Rempel on the call, baby. Drew Postey's having his baby, so he's not here.
Ooh. He's taking a day off? He's giving up a playoff game for childbirth? What an embarrassment to the profession at Drew Posty.
It's only a second, right?
I'm pretty sure she'll wait for him, but whatever. All right. See ya. Silver Fox will be on the call tonight with Dante de Caria. Coming up in hour 2, we will check in with Arash Madani and talk a lot of things Toronto, especially the Blue Jays, and we might even talk about that Leafs GM who got canned yesterday. You are listening to the Sports Cage on the home of the Riders and the Pats, 620 CKRM. Lots happening tonight locally. Western Hockey League playoffs. The Medicine Hat Tigers in Regina to take on the Pats. That game will be heard live on 620 CKRM. The pregame show with Dante de Caria and the Silver Fox, Kelly Rempel at 6:30. Puck drop at 7. That best of 7 series is tied up at 1. Maybe an upset brewing in that one. The Prince Albert Raiders visit the Red Deer Rebels. That is game 3 as well. Prince Albert leads that series 2-0. That's kind of a day David versus Goliath. Pretty good chance, a lot of people think, me included, that the Raiders are going to make short work of Red Deer. We'll see how that pans out. And the Edmonton Oil Kings are in Saskatoon to take on the Blades. That one shaping up to be a good series as well in the 3 versus 6 slot, tied at a game apiece. The Blades have taken home ice advantage. Junior B, Prairie Junior Hockey League playoffs. The league final, the Saskatoon Wesley's are in Regina tonight. Puck drop is at 7:45. That is a best of 7 series and all knotted up at 1 apiece. And in the World Men's Curling Championship, Canada is represented by Matt Dunstone's team from Manitoba. The championships run through April 4th in Ogden, Utah. On Team Canada's schedule tonight, they will take on Sweden. And that is your sports ticker for Reliance Heath Water Heater Rentals, keeping you in hot and soft water. Call Reliance. Coming up, hour 2, this is the Tuesday edition of the Sports Cage for Sask Lotteries on Rider Radio 620 CKRM. We are absolutely everywhere. You can join in on the show on the text line, like the voice mentioned. Prairie Land Rentals and Sales is the sponsor of the text line. Since 1986, for big or small jobs, stop in and deal with the owner. 600 Albert Street. Snowblowers, skid steers, power sources, moving equipment. Prairie Land Rentals and Sales. If you want to text in, 306-936-6262. And all guests on the show appearing on the Western Pizza hotline. Western Pizza gift cards are a perfect stocking stuffer, and the gift exchange, don't forget about their catering options as well. There you go. I used the outdated liner about the stocking stuffers. I knew I was going to trip into that, and I did it. I think that's a $2 fine. Also, later in the show, we will check in with Glen Suitor. I want to talk to him a little bit about teams celebrating their history and talk about Nathan Rourke as well. And we'll update you on what's happening with the curling and everything else. It's a busy, busy night. Locally, I'm really excited to see what happens with that Saskatoon Red Deer series, because if the Blades actually pull that out, that could be, sorry, not the Red Deer series, the Saskatoon Edmonton series. That's what I meant to say. If the Blades, excuse me, can somehow pull this off, that puts the Pats in a lot more interesting scenario. It doesn't change anything from a home ice perspective, but the more upsets you get in the first round, if you're a lower seed, your odds improve dramatically. I remember, like yesterday, the last time a Canadian franchise won the Stanley Cup, the Montreal Canadiens. A big reason why they won the Cup is there were just so many upsets early on. I remember Boston got upset by Buffalo in the first round, and that was when the Bruins were still good with Cam Neely and Ray Bourque and some of the others. And the Penguins, in a huge upset, they were 2-time defending Cup champions with Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr, lost to the Islanders. So by the time Montreal got to the conference finals, they weren't a great team in the regular season, yet they somehow seemed to have home ice advantage in all these series, and that was a big reason why they were ultimately able to capture that Stanley Cup. So I think that if the Pats are going to have any kind of a run, I think Saskatoon winning that series over Edmonton would help their chances dramatically. Let's go to Arash.
It's time to go coast to coast with Arash Madani for Smart Investing Solutions. Be smart with your money. Call Brian Gawley at Smart Investing Solutions, 546-2533.
Well, earlier in the show, we were chatting with Diamond Dante to Caria, excuse me, who teaches little kids pitching and thinks he knows all about pitching, and says that Trey Savage is going to have a short career. We'll get to that maybe a bit later. But there was a lot of optimism with the state of the Blue Jays starting rotation, and we knew that Shane Bieber wouldn't be ready right away, but everything else was supposed to be okay, and now it looks like it's maybe falling apart. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, you think about where just things were, Brennan. I mean, this was supposed to be the deepest part of the team, you know? Obviously, Kevin Gausman, opening day starter, and you think about the postseason that Max Scherzer had. They give Dylan Cease all that money, but then one by one in spring training, it's just been an arm falling, another one dropping, and then last night, Cody Ponce, who comes over from Caria with grand fanfare and the 3-year contract, a non-contact injury. First, he slipped off the mound a couple of times, but then a dribbler to his left towards the first baseline, a non-contact injury where he needed to be carted off the field. The Blue Jays are calling it a strain to the ACL, which is probably not what it is. It's probably a tear. It probably is, to what extent is it a tear? How long will he be out? Months, not days. Just brutal. Just brutal for him coming back to North America to pitch, coming back to the big leagues to pitch. And then from the broader standpoint, Barrios on the injured list with the dislocated elbow. You Savage with the shoulder issue that you want to get into a little bit later on. Shane Bieber, who knows what's going on with his elbow. And now this. Yikes.
So who's going to pick up the slack here? I think Scherzer starts tonight, if I'm not mistaken. But like, who's going to pick up the slack? Who do they have?
Well, I mean, there really isn't a next man up in the minors. They'll call up a name. But the pitcher, Brendan, to me, that I've never really understood what's going on here, because he bailed them out throughout last season when they were really in the depths of despair. And then the World Series, the postseason rolls around. They didn't really use Eric Lauer much, and they kept kind of discarding him. And then when they really needed him in that 18-inning game in LA, here comes Eric Lauer out of the bullpen and gives them bulk, gives them quality innings. He gave them a terrific start on the weekend. And now Eric Lauer, yet again, is going to be asked to come in and deliver and do work for the Jays. You know, they took him to arbitration. They said a whole bunch of terrible things about him in arbitration coming into this season. And all this guy has kind of done is perform. And now at a time where they really need something, they look to him again.
They're going to have to lean on him for a while, but still early. I don't make too much of the record. It's what did Sparky Anderson say? You win 60, you lose 60. It's what you do with the other 40. But 3-1. What do you think so far?
Yeah, there's also a Jim Leland line, and I like this one a little bit more. He said, basically be 500 at the end of May. Be 500, be healthy, and then with 100 games to go in the season, that's when your real. Let me try that in English. Your year really begins, and I think there's a lot of merit to that. We're now at a point where, everybody gets into the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. But it's the month of March still. There's no need to be looking at the standings. There's no need to be really looking at much other than the injury report, and make sure you don't fall too far out of the race. Because look, at the end of April last year, the Blue Jays were in bad shape. At the end of May, there was an argument to be made that maybe Ross Atkins and John Schneider don't survive this. And it wasn't until they went lights out in July that the entire season turned and they end up getting to Game 7 of the World Series. So at this point, it's about, let's get pitchers eating up innings. Let's try and get healthy. Let's get guys having quality at-bats, and then just take it from there.
Sometimes I kind of ask myself the question, how much fun is this really beating up on the Athletics when we know the Jays have such a big payroll? And then you realize, well, the cleat's been on the other foot for so long for so many of these fans. Let's just enjoy it while the cookie crumbles in our direction or whatever.
And not just that though, Brendan. Remember, every single win counts the same. Whether it's March 31st or August 31st or September 21st. So you just want to make sure you don't find yourself too far out of the race, and you want to make sure that you're in some kind of conversation. So that's a real important part of all this.
I remember, what's his name? John Sherholtz, longtime GM of the Atlanta Braves. He always said that he kind of had his own rule that he wouldn't make any moves till after 60 games. So, yeah, they're important, but you don't want to be knee-jerk either. You're not just a Toronto guy. You're very much into Canadian sport, and there was a bit of news that you want to talk about from yesterday that has a hook to the Olympics and youth sports.
I think this is one of the great stories of 2026 that a university basketball coach from Canada just got hired in the pros. So Carly Clark has been the head coach at TMU, formerly Ryerson, for the last 14, 15 years. Prior to that, she was at University of Prince Edward Island. a woman from Halifax who went to a small university, played basketball at Bishop's. She has been hired by the new WNBA franchise in Toronto. Now, in my lifetime that I can remember, there have been 2 coaches on the men's side that have gone from U Sports to the pros. Roy Rana left Ryerson at the time to coach overseas. Scott Morrison from Lakehead ended up coaching in the G League. Now he's on the bench with the Utah Jazz. And now here's Carly. They won a national championship 4 years ago at TMU. She's been on the national team kind of pathway as an assistant coach for the Olympic team. She's a head coach for like the U19 under 23 teams. She's just continued to work away at her profession. And after all this success, is now a professional basketball coach. I think that's really cool.
Do you think this will open doors for more Canadians to get to the pros, whether it's the WNBA or the NBA itself?
Yeah, it could. It could. But here's the interesting part. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday about the NCAA. And Brendan, their point to me was, that's pro sports now. And it is. It really is. Like, there is a cornerback from the Université Laval, played for the Rouge et Or, all-Canadian corner, last couple of years. He just got $200,000 US to go to Colorado State to play there next year. So, like, he would be the highest paid non-quarterback in the CFL to go be a corner at age 21, 22. So coaching that, you're coaching professionals now. Okay, they're still, I mean, some might be in school, but that's what it's become. Everything's free agency. There is no draft, et cetera, et cetera. So what professional sports now means, you know, Dave Smart's down at the University of Pacific right now. I won all those national championships with Carleton on the basketball side. It's just going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds and what really unfolds.
Yeah, kind of depressing to think that if we're going to keep getting good players in the CFL, some of these guys are just going to have to bite the bullet and take a pay cut if they're going to come north to Canada. And not everybody's going to want to do that, but that's a whole other discussion. One more thing I wanted to add. I read an article, I think it was The Athletic or wherever, that there was concern about the WNBA labor situation that might delay the opening of the Toronto Tempo. And I've been excited to watch basketball in the summer. Are we still concerned about that we might not see the Tempo start when they're supposed to?
No, they ratified their CBA last week, so that finally got completed. It got finished. There's major salary increases for the players. Obviously, the league and the owners won, but that has been cleared. I believe April 5th, April 6th, something like that. Sometime next week is going to be the expansion draft, and then the regular player draft. What's interesting about that whole labor situation, Brendan, is that most of the players, knowing the CBA was expiring, had their contracts all expire at the end of last season, most of them, which means that coming into this offseason, the majority of the players are free agents. So it's going to be a free-for-all when it comes to spending. Toronto has a chance to be competitive out of the gate if they want to be, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be interesting to watch and, to see how this all unfolds in free agency as much as anything else.
I think it's kind of ridiculous that we didn't have a team in Canada or in Toronto for so long, and I don't want to give Larry Tannenbaum too much credit, but I guess he has done things to bail out the Argos, and now I think he's still with this initiative, so maybe we'll give him a little bit of credit for doing this. Okay, now that we've talked about all the important stuff, I guess we'll talk about that hockey team that fired their general manager yesterday. Brad Treliving is out as GM of the Maple Leafs. He had a year left on his deal. Doesn't sound like too much of the Toronto media is surprised. What do you think?
Not surprised that it happened. I'm surprised by the timing. I'm surprised that you would allow a general manager to go through the trade deadline, all of 25 days ago or whatever it was, only to now exit him now, which is what this organization kind of did on the basketball side. They let Masai Ujiri do the draft, and then they dismissed him after that. Like, we can get into the resume of what worked, what didn't work. Treliving didn't make this hockey team better. His trades, especially at the deadline, Brandon Carlo, asset management wasn't strong, and all of it. It was a warranted hockey decision. The timing of it is very peculiar, and it just seems that this is a franchise that just continues to spin its wheels. You know, first it was Kyle Dubas out, and then Brennan Shanahan out, now Brad Treliving out, to say nothing of all the coaches over the years. And it's wild, Brendan. Like, they were this close to being up 3-0 in the series against Florida in the second round last year. And now look what has happened since. It's wild.
Yeah, crazy how the wheels just spin off over one move. I think about that a lot, that Game 3 in overtime against the Florida Panthers, how history could just be totally different for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But at the same time, I remember Don Hewitt having Mark Steven from Calgary on this very program right around the time they were figuring out whether Treliving was going to get extended in Calgary. And his response was, well, I mean, he's fine. They're all fine at their job. But you asked the question, are the Flames any closer to their goal of winning a Stanley Cup today than they were when they hired him nearly a decade ago? And I think the answer would have to be no. I think the same is true for the Toronto Maple Leafs. There was just no difference maker. They were missing that Anthopoulos difference maker when Anthopoulos was making the big trades and at least got everybody excited. And I don't know that that's his fault, but it just didn't seem like it was changing things. What about Doug Armstrong?
Too,
go ahead. Yeah.
Just real quick. The irony of all of this is that the Florida Panthers knocked the Toronto Maple Leafs off with Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett leading the way.
Right.
And Brad Treliving traded away from Calgary to Florida, and it burned him then and it burned him again.
Yeah, no kidding. Worked. No kidding. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, that's a really good point. Right. And I don't think for a second if he had a different last name, if he would have been the GM of the Maple Leafs, but that's a whole other discussion too. What do you think of the Doug Armstrong rumors? Is there a fit there? Do you think it's going to happen? I mean, it seems like we go through this period where there's a rumor that maybe they'll hire Brian Burke, and then eventually it happens, and then there's speculation they're going to hire this whiz kid Dubas, and then it happens. Do you think there's anything to Doug Armstrong going to Toronto?
Yeah, it's so hard to know. I mean, here's a guy from Sarnia, won a cup, obviously, with the Blues, and you just don't know. Keith Pelly, the Grand Poobah over there at MLSE, his line today was, this is the most important hire, and he's right. And he said the next GM will make the decision on the coach. Now, obviously, Armstrong and Berube have worked together before, won a Stanley Cup together before, on and on it goes. But I would have to believe that the timing of this is, let's try and get a little bit of a head start on casting a wider net to talk to more people. There has to be a large element to that. Now, is Armstrong somebody they'd want to talk to? Probably. He just resigned from Team Canada. Why is he doing that? Probably because, he wants, just in case. So whether or not it happens, I'm not sure. But, I mean, he's going to be top of the list that they're going to want to talk to.
Do you think they're at a point where they're going to have to blow up the roster? Like, are they heading into another rebuild here, or do you think that this is still savable, where you still build around around Matthews and just try to reload, take another run at it, or are we past that point?
One of the issues that Brad Treliving inherited, and then Brad Treliving piled on, is that he inherited a pile of no movement clauses, and then he added a bunch more himself. So this roster is not working. This core is not working. Who knows what's going on with the health of Austin Matthews beyond the MCL that he just had surgery with? He hasn't been the same for the last 2 years. They haven't had a quality goaltender in forever. On we can go. I just don't know how movable some of these pieces are going to be unless you go to guys and just say, this is what we want to do. So, you kind of shrug your shoulders right now and wonder the next person that comes in, how are you going to clean up this mess?
I remember Brian Burke crying about that when he took over. He said there were so many no movement, no trade clauses, and he said, well, it's not that I would never do one, but I don't like these. And it always astonishes me how it seems like the Leafs end up with so many of those. This is one of the prime franchises, one of the premier brands in North America in sports. That's kind of a failure on the part of management, isn't it? That they have to give out all these no movement clauses to get players in or get them re-signed.
I think that's a big sign of just where things are today. Matthew Tkachuk has one. Sam Bennett has one. Barkov has one. Nobody talks about it when you win. And the failure of management to need to do it, I think that's just the cost of doing business a lot of the time. You know, if you really want the player, and especially if it's a free agent, you gotta do what the player wants to do. The players run the show these days.
That was kind of like when people were asking Brendan Shanahan about them being so tight against the cap. He says, I think fans should just get comfy with that. It just is what it is. And he's probably right on that front. And again, they win that game 3. It's a totally different story last spring.
And here's the other part. Brendan, if you're not tight to the cap, fans will then say, why are you being so cheap?
As they should.
Why aren't you spending to the cap? Right. So like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
That's right. This is great. We still have time? Yeah. Dante to Caria he's worked a lot in I don't think you know Dante. He's the voice of the Regina Pats, but he's an Ottawa guy, and he's done a lot of minor league broadcasting with, I think, the Lansing Lugnuts and other teams. He will confess to anybody who will listen that he is a much bigger baseball fan than he is hockey fan. He talks to Dustin Mulliken, who I'm sure you're familiar with. They think that Trey Savage is always going to have injury problems because of his delivery. Has that thought ever entered your mind? Do you have any thought on that?
I don't have a thought on it. I don't know. I know nothing about the human anatomy and the shoulder and how this is all. It is so unicornish. His delivery, his style, his mechanic, etc. On top of that, they asked Savage to go through 5 different levels of pro ball last year, throwing the most innings he's ever pitched in his career. That all can, weigh into it. I mean, I don't know enough about how the human body works. Look, the most unorthodox anything you can do in sport, regardless of sport, on the elbow ligament is throw a baseball 95, 98, 100 miles an hour. It's a ticking time bomb before it pops. And then you think about everything else that goes into it, shoulders, etc. Dante will appreciate this story. Mulliken will appreciate this story. And I think you and the listeners and viewers will too, Brendan. I remember a few years ago talking to Kevin Gausman. And I asked Gausman, I said, what have you learned about arm, elbow, shoulder care? Because you haven't really been on the injured list much with injuries like those. And you know what Gausman told me? He was looking for different things to try in different sports, to try and get different ideas of different workouts. And he's scrolling on Instagram one day, and somehow a feed comes up from a world champion javelin thrower. And he begins watching javelin, this javelin thrower, Yoenis Veda. And he's like, a lot of what this guy's doing mimics what a pitcher does. So he DMs Veda out of the blue, introduces himself, and then they start exchanging messages back and forth. And Veda started talking to him about different javelin exercises that he does and whatever, which has now taken off so much stress off of Gausman's shoulder, arm, elbow in warm-up and activation, whatever, and it really actually activates his lower half because of the push-off that you need, which mimics kind of what a starting pitcher does. So javelin and baseball, that's something that Kevin Gausman picked up and has helped keep his arm, shoulder, elbow healthy and intact.
I totally respect that outside the box thinking, and I guarantee you that javelin thrower was stunned to get a call from Kevin Gausman and really appreciated that. It kind of makes me think of Russell Martin when I think he was training with Paralympic athletes, like just totally outside the box. This is great. We're going to talk again on Thursday, but I want to talk about some Argo CFL stuff. I'll text you and we'll talk about it on Thursday.
I look forward to it. See you, bud.
Okay, that is Arash Madani. And coming up, still ahead in hour 3, press coverage with Glen Suitor. You are listening to the SportsCage on the home of local sports in Saskatchewan, 620 CKRM. You know they can help with your livestock operations, but now book your solar quotes for your home, farm, or cabin. Save money with the local company Keln Solar in Lumsden. And that is the sponsor of our Clutch Performer. And sometimes we like to go local. Sometimes we like to go with somebody who makes a big play. And I'm going to go a little outside the box. We're going to roll with Tyler Heineman, the normally backup catcher, who had to finish off the 9th inning in the blowout loss, the mop-up relief effort for the Blue Jays against the Colorado Rockies last night. That's not a small thing. A lot of people think it's just no big deal for somebody to go up and just mop up. We forget that Jose Canseco threw his arm out once, right in the prime of his career, playing for the Texas Rangers, doing that mop up. And it's not something that those guys are used to doing, not even the catchers. And even something as small as just standing on the mound and that close to a hitter. You know, he's used to being behind the plate with his mask on. He's not used to being right on the mound where you have to protect yourself at a line drive, especially when you're just doing soft toss at that point because you're in mop-up. And that's essentially just batting practice for the other guys.
Exactly. I got a couple clutch performers I'll hand out. First one goes to John Tortorella. Gets the first win, taking over the Vegas Golden Knights.
They just cycle through coaches, hey? I guess it's no different than other organizations, but they're not afraid to do that. I feel like the Vegas Golden Knights, because how many coaches have they have? I'm just going off memory. They started with Gallant, and then they had, I think it was Pete DeBoer was next. And then they kicked him to the curb, and they had Cassidy, and now they're rolling with Torts. I think those are the only coaches they've had with Vegas so far. And
DeBoer, Cassidy, Tortorella. Yep.
Yeah, I think they started in 2017. Was that their first year? So basically, it's been less than a decade, and they've gone through 4 coaches. Mm-hmm. You could say, well, that's par for the course, but usually elite organizations try not to do that. But that's just the sport. That's the shelf life, and I think that's just Kelly McCrimmon and the owner, what's his name, Foley, saying that's just the lay of the land. Coaches have 2-3 years, and we're just going to roll with it. Mm-hmm. So
they have had only one captain in the whole time. That's Mark Stone since 21.
Yeah, he's really worked out. Hey, I mean, I think Ottawa knew he had those qualities. Things just weren't a fit at that time because Ottawa was kind of a joke for an organization, and they just didn't have capacity to have a guy like him around. But their loss is Vegas's gain.
Yep. And my last one here is, I just found this one, but Brad Kovachuk is going to have his final skate as an NHL linesman tonight in Florida, retiring after a 30-year career.
Wow.
Yeah, first NHL game, October 10th, 96. That's almost a year before I was born. 1,971 regular season games, 200 playoff games, 5 Stanley Cup finals, and he also reffed the 2014 Olympics.
I don't think that's a record. I could be wrong, like the 30 years. There have been some linesmen who went a long way, but we forget it's not like Cowboy Joe West, the longtime umpire. He umped for over 40 years, but it's a different deal when you're standing behind the plate. These guys really have to fly all over the ice, and they have to stay in shape, so... Well done. Those are some good winners for the Clutch Performer, brought to you by Keln Solar. You know they can help with your livestock operations, but now book your solar quotes for your home, farm, or cabin. Save money with the local company Keln Solar in Lumsden. More of Hour 2 when we come back, and Glen Suitor still on the way. You are listening to the SportsCage for Sask Lotteries on Rider Radio 620 CKRM. All guests that appear on the SportsCage appear on the Western Pizza Guest Hotline. It's the pizza known worldwide for a reason, loaded with toppings of Western Canadian ingredients and always cooked to perfection. Their Greek-style pizza that has become famous around the world, plus all the Greek and Canadian food you can't get enough of. Western Pizza, the local legend. Brendan McGuire and Colson Schultz with you on this Tuesday edition of the program for Sask Lotteries. Bringing communities together, Sask Lottery products fund over 12,000 sports, culture, and recreation groups across Saskatchewan. Glen Suitor will join us in hour 3, and we're going to talk some CFL stuff, and I've got some questions for him about a major milestone that the Canadian Football League does not celebrate enough, and it involves the greatest, probably most spectacular football season of all time by any athlete. We'll do that in hour number 3. Speaking of people on the West Coast, which is where Suits lives, I wanted to talk about the Vancouver Canucks. I grew up a major Vancouver fan. I was kind of a free agent at a young age, like so many of us are, and the era of Pavel Bure and Igor Larionov just totally sucked me in. Bure was so much fun to watch. He had such an explosive burst, and I sometimes have trouble watching hockey because we don't have that anymore. Like, the game is really, really fast, but it's almost like ping pong going from one end to the other, and we don't see plays set up the way we used to. But anyways, anytime the Canucks come on and they're wearing their retro skate jersey, I watch. And even though their team has been, I don't want to use the term disaster. I think we get a little too dramatic with the sports teams, but they've had a terrible, terrible year. And people who watch the Canucks say that they're not just the worst team in the NHL. It's kind of like that line from the Moneyball movie where Brad Pitt says, "There's 50 feet of crap and then there's us," when he's pretending to be Billy Bean, talking about the Oakland Athletics and their low payroll. That's where the Vancouver Canucks are right now. I hear it from their fans. I hear it from ex-players. I hear it from NHL analysts who say that the Canucks are that team beneath the 50 feet of crap separating them and everybody else in the NHL right now. So they're having a terrible, terrible year, but then to top it off, the owner steps up and makes a price increase. And so some season ticket holders are complaining that they're getting notices that their price increase isn't like, we're not talking 5% or 10% or something to make up for the inflation that we've all had in the last 5 years. It's 25%. Now, I don't know if that's quite right across the board, but you just think, yeah, wowza. And for sports teams, price increases are something very, very different from just about anything else. When your foundation is not solid, it can turn on you real fast, and you have to be careful with that. So generally, I think most sports teams try to project and separate their price increases by 5 years, give or take. And if the team's doing really, really well, then yep, you're going to hike the price. You're going to do modest increases, maybe even above inflation. But a 25% hike seems a little steep. And so a lot of the fans are complaining that they don't want to get season tickets anymore. And often teams can get, especially at the highest level, the NFL is the worst for this. I spent a year in Southern Ontario in Windsor, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's essentially a Canadian suburb of Detroit. So I had the good fortune or misfortune, depending on how you want to look at it, for being a glorified tape collector covering the Detroit Lions for a season, going back 20 years now. And it wasn't really all that exciting, but a lot of the fans would complain to the ticket office that they weren't going to renew because they were so upset about either the way they were treated or how bad the team was being run, et cetera, et cetera. And they would literally get responses from people in the ticket office saying, yeah, everybody always says that, and then they always come back next year. So the NFL has seemed to get away with a lot of things. I don't know that the Vancouver Canucks or the NHL are so popular, unbelievably popular, that they can just jack up everybody's prices by 25% and everybody's going to come back. So it's a really touchy thing when you're dealing with a pro sports team or any sports team. Dealing with a sports team is not like any other business. And I think a lot of the owners of these pro sports franchises have learned that the hard way. So just how committed and loyal and diehard are Vancouver Canuck fans to the brand, I think we're going to have that put to the test in the next year or two ahead, because you can sometimes sell rebuilding or sell high draft picks or prospects. Vancouver doesn't really have much of that at all right now because they've had so many rebuilds in the last 5 or 6 years. And eventually people just stop paying attention. It's kind of like something Dante to Caria and I talked about earlier in the show. He was talking about the Prince Albert Raiders and just how dominant they were this year. And a lot of people are picking them to win the Memorial Cup. And on their roster, they have some star power, but it's really not the stars who drive the bus for Prince Albert. They have 4 lines that you can roll. They have unbelievable depth. And that makes a big, big difference. And that's an organization that's well run. The Winnipeg Jets are likely going to miss the playoffs this year. And that's going to happen. But they have an unbelievable core. Like last year's team that won the President's Trophy had 18 players on their roster who were drafted and developed by the Winnipeg Jets, and not a lot of them were big stars. Like Josh Morrissey was a big star, I guess, kind of. Hellbuck, the goalie's a big star. But outside of that, they had a lot of just good, solid, a little above average NHL players. And I guess where I'm going with this is in Winnipeg, even though they're having a bad year, you can still support that they are a well-run organization. Kelly McCrimmon himself says that the best draft and develop organization in the NHL today is the Winnipeg Jets. So I feel like if that's a team that has to offer a price hike or put forward a price hike, they might not do it after a year when they miss the playoffs. You would hope that they have the sense not to do that. But if they win the President's Trophy again next year and they lose in the second or third round, they might be able to get away with the price hike. I think people can live with that. I don't know that you can do that when you are number 32 out of 32 teams in the National Hockey League. It just seems like a display of arrogance and a little bit of a grab from an ownership that has a bit of a history of, how do I say this, ticking off its fan base. They're very unpopular. I didn't understand for a long time because I don't pay close enough attention, but I think the hardcore sports fans who live on the West Coast pay a lot more attention, and they don't like this ownership group. The Aquilinis have done a lot of things that have frustrated people. Management doesn't like working for the Aquilinis. Even Jim Rutherford has said that they're not easy to work for, but they talked him out of retirement, and because they flew down to see him, he kind of got to write his own ticket. And he always says, I don't need this job, but they keep him around. So ultimately, you might have a problem with the people running the show in Vancouver, and they're doing silly things like throwing people out of the press box and getting attention, I think, for all the wrong reasons. So the Canucks might be in a situation where they need to maybe make a change with ownership. I think that it might be overdue. And listen, a lot of that stuff will fly just fine when you're winning, and it does not fly when you are not. I wanted to also address something that we talked about with Arash earlier this hour with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Brad Treliving was the general manager for a long time for the Calgary Flames. He was hired by Brian Burke. I heard he got good reviews for his work in the minors and other things that he did. But in his time in Calgary, I don't think anybody feels like he was a difference maker. Mark Steven was on this show with Don Hewitt about a week before Treliving got fired and made the point, yeah, everybody likes Brad, but you have to ask the question, are the Calgary Flames any closer today to their goal of winning a Stanley Cup than they were the day that he took over as a general manager? And I think you'd have to say no. And so they eventually moved on from him. And I think it was the right decision because they needed to clean things up. And listen, I know with the NHL, with the salary cap the way it is and players with no trade clauses, sometimes it's harder to get things done. But the good GMs still find a way, whether it's through draft and develop or making really complex deals so that you can move players around. It's your job to figure it out. It's a very big privilege to be a general manager in the National Hockey League. So when they hired Treliving, I was never a big fan of it in the first place. And don't get me wrong, I like Brendan Shanahan. I think Brendan Shanahan was pretty good for the Maple Leafs for most of the time that he was there. I loved how he swept Kyle Dubas out. I thought Dubas got way too big for his britches. And when he was playing all the mind games, like, yes, I want an extension. They offered him an extension. Then he's telling the media that he wants to maybe spend more time with his family. And then he leaves Shanahan hanging for a week and says, I want to come back. So for Shanahan to push him out the way he did and then detail it all to the Toronto media, I thought was brilliant. I thought that was a terrific move, and I don't think Kyle Dubas should be the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs either. But at the time, I wondered, like, what is so great about Brad Treliving, other than his last name, that makes him so qualified to be the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs? That's how I felt about it then. That's how I feel about it now. I don't know that he was ever really a difference maker. Even if the Maple Leafs win Game 3 against the Florida Panthers last year, and they were oh so close because it went to overtime. They're up 2-0, and you have to think if they can win game number 3, that it's going to be curtains. They're going to win that series. It's highly unlikely that the Panthers are going to pound their way back from down 3-0 to beat the Maple Leafs. And it makes you wonder what might have been. The Maple Leafs, could they have run the table the way Florida did? I don't think so, but they might have had a nice run so that this group is still together a little bit longer. But clearly, things are not going well in TO, and I agreed with, there was a column put out by Damian Cox with the Toronto Star right around the time Austin Matthews was paraded out for the State of the Union along with a lot of the other U.S. Olympic hockey players, and he seemed to just go along with it. And it's always Steve Simmons who writes the controversial articles about the Maple Leafs and about Austin Matthews. But in this case, it was Damian Cox who opined that Austin Matthews utterly failed in his role as Toronto Maple Leafs captain in that whole circumstance. And I couldn't agree more. I don't know. I don't know that I see a whole lot of leadership qualities there. His sponsorship with, I think it's MGM or one of the big betting companies, when he's been asked about it, he just smirks and he just walks away. And I think if you're captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, if you feel so good about the role that you have as a spokesperson, then you need to stand up there and you need to face the music and you need to substantiate your position. With that role comes privilege. And I think other than being a really good goal scorer, I just don't think that Austin Matthews has ever had the qualities that are required to be captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The PR nightmare that comes from what he did with the State of the Union notwithstanding, it's like, read the room, man. And he's never done that. So I'm not saying that he's the reason why the Maple Leafs have had such a bad year, but it's clear that things in Toronto are not going well and are a big mess. And somebody's going to have to come in and clean all this up. It'll be interesting to see who they go with, whether it's Doug Armstrong or somebody else, but it's not the type of market where I think you want to have a rookie GM. I think for the most part, you want somebody who's had a few rodeos in their day, and Doug Armstrong has a lot of rodeo competitions at the NHL level to his name, so maybe he's the guy. Coming up in hour 3, we will check in with Glen Suitor. You are listening to the SportsCage on Rider Radio 620 CKRM. Lots of WHL playoffs tonight. Of course, we have the Pats game here against the Medicine Hat Tigers. That'll be game number 3. Series tied at 1, best of 7. Dante to Caria and Kelly Rempel will have the pregame show at 6:30. Puck drop at 7 o'clock from the Brandt Center. Prince Albert Raiders trying to go up 3-0 on Red Deer, and the Saskatoon Blades are home to the Edmonton Oil Kings. That series is knotted up at 1 apiece. Another upset might be brewing in that one. Prairie Junior Hockey playoffs. The league championship final continues tonight in Regina. The Capitals host the Saskatoon Wesleys. 7:45 puck drop. That best of 7 series is tied at 1 game apiece. Canada is represented by Matt Dunstone's team in the World Curling Championships for men. The championships run through April 4th. It's all happening in Ogden, Utah. Team Canada plays against Sweden tonight at 7 o'clock. NHL tonight. The Montreal Canadiens are in Tampa. Ottawa visits Florida. Winnipeg Jets are at the Chicago Blackhawks. The Oilers host Seattle. And MLB, the Toronto Blue Jays against the Colorado Rockies. And that's the sports ticker for Extreme Hockey and Sport. Whatever your spring sport is, Extreme Hockey has you covered. Brendan McGuire and Colson Schultz on this Tuesday SportsCage for Sask Lotteries, bringing communities together. Sask Lottery products fund over 12,000 sports, culture, and recreation groups across Saskatchewan, and I learned the hard way that they don't take coins anymore in downtown Regina. I saw that on the news the other day. Now you've got to download the app or call in and do all this stuff, and it took me about 15 minutes, but maybe it's better in the long run. I don't know, but I don't do well with change, and so I'm adapting just like everybody else who has to work and spend time in downtown Regina. Let's just go to Suitor.
Time now for press coverage with CFL and Saskatchewan Roughrider legend Glen Suitor on the SportsCage. Brought to you by Freeze Tallman Lumber, locally owned, family grown, rooted in our community for 70 years in Regina and Fort Capel.
Oh, sweet. We got matching hats today. Look at that, eh? Geniuses think alike.
Didn't even call each other either.
We should do that more often.
Yeah, so you got an Alouettes jersey. Is that an Alouettes jersey you're wearing?
I'm glad that somebody finally asked. I've been showing it off the whole show, and no, this is a Montreal Concords jersey.
Concord.
See, I have this thing that I don't want a Tom Brady jersey or a Patrick Mahomes jersey or a Brett Favre jersey or even a Chad Kelly jersey, because the world is just stacked full of them, and that's not interesting to me. What's cool is when you find old retro CFL jerseys with really cool logos that have been completely forgotten. That's when you have something. I have a Vince Ferragamo old Montreal Alouettes jersey that I hope to get him to sign one day. And today I'm rocking a Turner Gill Montreal Concords jersey. And I was actually going to bring this up with you because I want your thoughts on this. I was talking to somebody close to the BC Lions a little while ago, and I was talking about Doug Flutie's amazing season with the Lions, right? He passed for over 6,600 yards, and it's almost like it's just totally forgotten. Like, it's never been celebrated. It doesn't really get talked about all that much. And that's a record that will probably never be broken, even by the NFL, unless they go to like a 24-game schedule or something, 20-game schedule or something silly like that. I talked to George Cortez all the time, and he said that in that season, 5 of those games went to overtime, and that was when you had the old overtime format of 10 minutes. Like, you played a full 10 minutes. So Doug actually technically kind of played 19 games that year. So that's partly why he got to the record. So I brought that up with somebody close to the Lions saying, why don't you have a game that season, like, that was magical. I think a big reason why I'm a CFL fan was I was 8-9 years old at the time, and that was my first exposure to it. And I was like, what a great game this is. I don't know that I'd be a CFL fan if it didn't hit me right at that time, because the games were just so much fun to watch in that era. And so I made the point that that season, the Lions played a game against the Toronto Argonauts, and it was Rocket Ismail versus Doug Flutie. It was Murray Pezim in the booth with John Candy and Bruce McNall and all these crazy shykesters. But the camera, it offered a little bit of Hollywood drama that we don't often get. There was over 50,000 people, and it was like the greatest game ever. That went to overtime. And I said, what you guys should do is you need to celebrate that game. You guys should wear the same jerseys that you wore in that game. And when the Argonauts come to town, make them do the same. And you can have Flutie and maybe a few other players from that BC team be the honorary captains to go do the coin toss. Invite Pinball Clemens, maybe Rocket Ismail. I think you see where I'm going with all this. And invite everybody who was there on that night to come back and see what you get out of it. And the response I got is, that's a really good idea, but we're not really nostalgic here. And look, BC might have the best ownership group in the league, and I get it. You're not thinking, geez, we want to get the old white guy like Brendan. That's a problem for the CFL. They want to get the new generation. But I think it kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? Like, recreating the past, you bring that to life so that the younger generation learns about it and gets interested in it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a fantastic idea.
Thank you very much, and it was totally mine, so I will take full credit for it.
Yeah, take credit for it. I love the idea because, first of all, you're bringing in some big names, and the younger generation that every sports league is trying to get is still aware of Doug Flutie and what he did in both leagues. He's some of the players that you mentioned will have appeal to even a younger crowd. So I think there is some crossover there. But the bigger picture discussion here, and I think this is where you want to go, Brendan, is the thought of how much do we bring in the past and the history of the game with trying to sell the young kids on the excitement and what the game provides today and the stars of today. And we've heard many times the thought that we don't do enough as a league to promote the current players that are on the field. And one of the best ways to do that as a broadcaster is to compare them to other players from the past. I mean, that's over 6,000 yard passing year by Doug Flutie was an amazing season. I mean, Matt Dunnigan threw for over 700 yards in one game. And he told me many times over a beverage or two that he could have probably threw for 1,000 yards that game, that there were 3 big plays down the field that they missed. And he said that game was, and that's a record that will never be broken. So when you're looking at, whether it be, let's say it's Trevor Harris, who's off to a great start and has a 400-yard passing game, which is totally doable for him right now in the game that we know right now and the rules that we know right now. And you start to push some of those limits, those big time records. Why not bring in the guy and say, this is Matt Dunnigan. He threw for 700. In the last one, it was 500 for Trevor Harris. He's getting close to that record. I mean, this is a balancing act. I think there's a real sort of, for every league and every entertainment entity, there's this real sort of fear that if we talk about the old days, we'll lose the young crowd. And I just think that's way too simplified, that, we should be melting the two. As a player, as a former player, I have nothing but great respect for the shoulders that we stood on when it was our turn to carry the torch for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. When it was Bobby Jurison and Kent Austin, who, by the way, threw for over 6,000 yards in the season as well. There's only a handful of guys that have done. I think David Archer's done it. Doug did it a couple of times, and Kent Austin. There might be one more. I think
Calvillo might be the only other one, but you're right. It's a very short list. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you think about those players and those milestones that they hit, those records, then, mix them with what's happening today. Trevor Harris is very capable of a 400 or even a 500-yard passing game. And if he ever gets close, or if he ever gets close to 5,000 yards or over 5,000 yards in the season, and you see there's 3 games left, well, if he's around 5,000 yards, having said, now I'm thinking out loud here, but if he's around 5,000, those last 3 games, he's probably sitting because they've got first place locked up in the division.
But at least you can still compare.
Your point is a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, your point is a good one. And I truly believe, I've suggested at times, and I think technology has finally caught up to this idea, that it would be really cool to me to have an opening montage for Friday Night Football, say on TSN, where Ron Lancaster walks out or breaks the huddle, and you could show the old footage, and then Ron turns around and hands it to George, and then George Murph changes into, through AI or whatever, he changes into AJ Ouellette, and Lancaster turns into Trevor Harris as he's bootlegging out of there, and you mix the two. You mix the great history of the game and the players whom shoulders that the current players are standing on, and the great respect they have for it. And I think we can do both. I really do. And it's important to me. It really is.
And it's one of the things that the league has to separate itself from all those gimmicky pop-up leagues like the United Football League and all the other stuff that
Absolutely.
fails miserably. I thought of an example with, I'm sure you'll be interested in this because it relates to broadcasting, but I remember when Rogers took over Hockey Night in Canada, and one of the first things they did was they installed George Stroumboulopoulos as the host and pushed Ron McLean to the back. And I remember my wife was just over the moon. She said, "Oh, this is terrific," because she loves George, right? not really a hockey fan. And I liked George too. But the problem with that was I would turn on hockey on Saturday nights and I would quickly say, he'd be doing things like tweeting out top 10 bands of all time at intermission. And I'd listen to him talk, and it would become apparent really quickly that this guy knows less about hockey than I do. So I'm going to find other things to do with my Saturday nights. And clearly there were other people who did the same thing. And I felt like the lesson learned in all that was whether it's politics or business, or in this case, sports and entertainment, you have to think of two things. Big tent, you always want to be big tent. But how do we do it in a way that really services our diehards and doesn't take our diehards for granted? And I just think that when you're not celebrating that history that's right there in front of you, right? Like, none of us are going to live forever, and it's been over 30 years since that happened. But getting a little off topic with that, one thing that I don't like is like even when the Riders play the Ticats and they say, we're going to honor the 89 Grey Cup game, and they have a few players who are on that team, and that's nice. That's a great idea. But they never wear the jerseys from the 89 Grey Cup game. And I ask people in the league, like, why don't they just do that? And the response I get is, well, there's some cost and this and that. And I just say, give me a break. This is a $250 million a year league or whatever. We're going to cheap out on just getting retro jerseys. Like that stuff looks so cool, and that builds enthusiasm. I just feel like it gets ignored. And it's not just, I'm not blaming one organization or even the CFL. I just think that organizations that fail to recognize going the extra mile with that kind of stuff are dropping the ball. And even I would even say that the Alouettes should just have fun some night and be the Concords. You can laugh at your dubious history too. The New York Islanders wear the Fisherman Friends logo, even though the fans hated it, because that's what sports is supposed to be. Sometimes we can just think about, hey, remember when we were at our rock bottom? Let's have a laugh about it and celebrate the fact we're not there anymore.
Yeah, and let's break down to two things here too that I think is happening today more than not. One is what we just mentioned, which is, corporations and leaders when it comes to pro sports and entertainment are so afraid that they're going to lose the young generation and the social media presence and all of those things that they are so worried about all the time. But I also would, suggest that today, we at times take for granted excellence. You mentioned Ron MacLean, and one of the best ever hosts of hockey and Hockey Night in Canada, and all the history that he has been a part of. I think sometimes now for this young trying to be a social media presence more than making sure that it's right and it's true and it's promoting the right things. And let's not take excellence for granted. If you see a great play-by-play guy or a great owner or GM of a team, and you have one down year or one idea that didn't work, that's not a fireable offense. Those are things that you look at the whole history of it and say, Ron MacLean's been he's been a pillar when it comes to presenting National Hockey League. And one of the reasons, not the reason, the players in the game are the reason, but one of the reasons that they are now, franchise values are through the roof is because of guys like Ron that were telling the story throughout Canada. So, I think that we're starting to forget that, excellence is hard to come by. And when you have it, value it, keep that person as long as you possibly can, and make sure that now you try to, bring in the young social media guys to add to it. But don't, just because he's getting a little older, don't forget or take for granted that he's excellent.
Yeah, and if you're going to replace him with some young punk, that's okay, because he's not going to live forever or can't do that role forever, but ease in a succession plan. Don't just throw him for somebody who the current audience might or might not, has no attachment to, which I felt like was the case. But these are the things that keep me up at night. But I was going to ask you about Nathan Rourke. Yeah, you had a thought on Nathan Rourke?
Well, I went on Sunday out to, Nathan, this is week 2 of the Flag Football League in the Lower Mainland and on the West Coast. And I went and saw, one of the games that Nathan played. And there's been a lot of discussion about Nathan's decision to do this. And, the general manager of the BC Lions, Ryan Rigmaiden, has said that he has permission to play for the Olympic team if he makes it. And, his idea there was, if I'm going to take a run at this, I have to learn the game. The game is different, and I have to understand it and learn it. And I think it's a fantastic approach to it. And every player that has aspirations of playing for the Olympic team or trying to make the Olympic team in 28 should be thinking about doing exactly what Nathan's doing. So I went out on Sunday, and there was a couple of things, Brendan. One was the great buzz that was happening around the fields. There were three games, I think, across ways in the field, because the flag football field's only 50 yards wide. So they can play 3 games at once and kind of share sidelines. And I went and watched him play the first game, had a good conversation with Nathan, real exciting, and he looked fantastic. He really did. I mean, I think in this game, they won 35-18, and all but one series, Nathan didn't generate a touchdown drive offensively. I think there was one series where they didn't make it to halfway mark. So, he fit right in. He was able to move the pocket. He was able to use his legs, and like we've seen him in tackle football. And the buzz around the field was incredible, because behind me, as people were walking by, I kept hearing, I think he's on field 3 for the second game. I got to go see, and there was some camera crews there for local news, and the league itself was certainly taking as much video as they could. And I asked Nathan how he did and how he felt about it, and he said it was a ton of fun, and he loves the game. He thought it was excellent, and said that he's going to keep learning and learning the nuance, because he'd love to represent his country one day. So, I think this is a fantastic way to do it. And if there's anyone out there in the media or wherever that criticizes this because he's playing in a men's league, it's the elite division, obviously, but he's playing in a men's league of flag football, and how does that, look to the Canadian Football League or pro football? I think it's just ridiculous, because not only does he want to earn the respect of his teammates in flag football for this team, he was the beer guy, by the way, because he was a rookie on Sunday, and it was his first game, so he had to be the beer guy afterwards when it was all said and done, which I loved, which he embraced. And then, and most importantly, learn the nuance. But there are 1 million people right now playing flag football in our country. And that number is going to explode after 28. It's going to grow, probably double by the time it gets to 28. In talking to the organizer, the last 3 years in flag football, it has grown by 300% for the women and something like 30-40% for the men. It's gone. His league alone has gone from 25 or 26 teams to now 57 teams. And, I know Saskatchewan is one of the leaders when it comes to flag football. Barney is one of the coaches, I believe. And, and I think he's still coaching. He hasn't been fired yet. I hope Barney hasn't been fired by his flag football team yet.
The team can continue even if he does. It'll continue to grow.
Exactly. No, I'm kidding.
But since 2005, there were 5,000 youth playing registered football in Saskatchewan. Now it's 25,000. So it's 5 times as much as it was 20 years ago. And the difference is largely flag football, to your point.
Yeah. Yeah, and and I know there's some concern from guys that are working with tackle football that are saying that not a huge number of kids are going from flag to tackle yet. But my point there is, first of all, they're throwing the football around. They're excited about the sport. It's such an inclusive game, flags, because women can play. You can have different size people playing. Everyone can do it. There's different divisions. It's a throw and catch, almost basketball feel at times. But beyond that, it gets people excited about the sport, which will cross over. If you're excited about your flag football team, you might want to check out a Rider game if you've never done it before. to see the tackle version of the game that you've just discovered. And if that happens a handful of times with a handful of kids, it's growth. And those, 10, 100 kids, their parents want to go, their sister or brother wants to go, their friends want to go to a game. And it just grows the whole sport in our country. And I was really impressed by the athleticism, not just Nathan, some really good players out there.
I'm just popping in before we let you go here because we're running out of time. Can you confirm that Nathan's name on the back of his jersey is Moneybags? Because I think that's what I'm seeing here. And he's got a dollar sign for a number too. I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah. And guess that wasn't his choice. But this is what I mean. And I don't care if you were one of the players out there playing against him or on the field beside him or whatever it might be, and you were excited about trying to intercept Nathan Rourke, because that will be a story that you can keep for the rest of your life. And if guys are too cool to say it, they're lying to you, because if Jerry Taggy or one of the great BC Lions of the past or Ron Lancaster came out and played flag football again, and I got to play against him as a DB and picked him off, maybe, that would be a story I would tell for the rest of my life. And it would get better. I took it to the house. That story would grow. And so it's good for both sides.
And if the CFL isn't touching people in that league and in that whole community, they are now, because of his involvement there too. And
right.
I'm with you. I see no downside in it. I used to think, well, it'd be kind of bush league if he has to miss a few regular season games for the Olympics. And no, it's not. It's our chance to beat the Olympics or beat the Americans. Yeah. And they're not going to give us any respect anyways. But if we beat them, maybe that'll change a little bit. But I know you wanted to add something, Colson? Oh, okay. You're done. I was just going to wrap things up, and I know you're back on Thursday. I'm back on Thursday. So let's see if we can guess what hat that we're wearing, and see if we can match hats again on Thursday.
You got it, Brendan. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right. That is Glen Suitor joining us on the Western Pizza Hotline, and it's the pizza that's known worldwide for a reason, loaded with toppings of Western Canadian ingredients and always cooked to perfection. The Greek-style pizza that has become famous around the world, plus all the Greek and Canadian food you can't get enough of. Western Pizza, the local legend. Back with more on the Sports Cage here on Rider Radio 620 CKRM. Time for trivia, PumpJacks Trivia, and here's the question. The CFL draft was once hosted in Saskatoon. On that day, the Saskatchewan Roughriders would draft future Hall of Famer Gene Mikowski. He wasn't the first Rough Rider drafted that day, but we don't care about that. What year was that draft? Call now, and the first correct answer will win a $150 gift card. 1-866-767-0620 or 306-936-6262. First correct answer wins that $150 gift card. What year was the draft hosted, CFL draft, in Saskatoon?
It's time for the Sports Ticker, brought to you by Steelcraft Doors Regina, made in Western Canada for Western Canadians.
And that trivia for PumpJacks Cathedral and Saloon and Steakhouse. Time for the ticker. Western Hockey League tonight, of course, we'll have the Regina Pats play the Medicine Hat Tigers in Game 3 on the almighty 620 CKRM. Dante to Caria and Kelly Rempel will have the pregame show at 6:30. Game starts at just after 7. Prince Albert Raiders are in Red Deer, trying to go up 3-0 on that best-of-7 series. And the Saskatoon Blades are home to the Edmonton Oil Kings. That series tied up at 1 apiece, just like the Pats and Tigers. And the Blades, with home ice advantage, they have stolen from the Oil Kings in that series. Prairie Junior Hockey League Junior B Playoff League final tonight. The Saskatoon Wesleys are in Regina to play the Capitals. 7:45 puck drop. That best-of-7 is tied at 1. Team Canada's Matt Dunstone is on the ice tonight against Sweden. That's at 7 o'clock Saskatchewan time. Major League Baseball, the Toronto Blue Jays Jays facing the Colorado Rockies. That's a 5 o'clock, or the game is just underway. Check that. And, of course, games in the NHL tonight. The Montreal Canadiens visiting Tampa Bay. The Ottawa Senators go on the road to face the Florida Panthers. The Winnipeg Jets are in Chicago to play the Blackhawks. And the Edmonton Oilers are home to the Seattle Kraken, and that is the NHL skid tonight, at least involving the Canadian teams, and that will pretty well cover it. And I should mention that the ticker is for Steelcraft Doors Regina, made in Western Canada for Western Canada.
We've got Jeff on the line for trivia.
Jeff? What's your answer?
Well, you can ask the question.
Well, hold on. I'll re-ask the question. Sorry, I'm new at this. All right. And it's okay. I'm grateful that you called in, because the whole reason I got into radio was I was a prize pig at a very young age, winning all kinds of stuff on here. The question, the CFL draft was once hosted in Saskatoon. On that day, the Saskatchewan Roughriders would draft future Hall of Famer Gene Mikowski. What year did that happen?
Was it 1995?
There you go.
We'll get better celebration music, but that is correct. You, sir, are the winner of the gift card. Thanks for calling in, and congratulations.
Great. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the week.
Okay, and that's it. Okay, we will take a timeout and continue. You are listening to the Sports Cage on Rider Radio 620 CKRM.